venit la o nouă ediție a emisiunii Ziua se apropie. În minutele care urmează vă prezentăm raportul european de la Bruxelles din decembrie 2025 din seria de rapoarte lunare de acest fel. Yossi Lempkowicz îi are ca invitați pe Hildegard Bentele, politician german din Uniunea Creștin-Democrată și membru al Parlamentului European din 2019, și pe Tomas Sandell, directorul Coaliției Europene pentru Israel, pentru a discuta despre conferința de la Bruxelles recent încheiată pe tema relațiilor dintre Israel și Uniunea Europeană în noul Orient Mijlociu. Vizionare plăcută!
Last month, the European Coalition for Israel, ECI, and member of the European Parliament, Hildegard Bentele, co-hosted the ECI Annual Policy Conference here in the European Parliament. The topic of this conference was EU-Israel relations in the new Middle East, and it featured the new ambassador of Israel to the European Union, Avinir Feldklein, fellow MEP Rihat Kols from Latvia, and the new head of the division which deals with Israel at the European External Action Service, Vladimir Janasek. In this edition of the European report, we will look back at some of the highlights of the conference, and we will discuss how if it at all, the new dynamics playing in the Middle East affect EU-Israel relations. In this program, I'm pleased to have the two co-hosts of the conference, German MEP Hildegard Bentele, who chairs the European Parliament delegation for relations with Israel, and of course, founding director of the European Coalition for Israel, Tomas Sandell. My name is Yossi Lempkowicz from European Jewish Press and Europe-Israel Press Association. This is the European report. MEP Bentele, I will start with you. All the living Israeli hostages are now back in Israel from Gaza, and only two bodies of deceased hostages remain. Furthermore, there is now a fragile ceasefire in Gaza and a concrete 20-point peace plan from President Trump, endorsed by the United Nations Security Council and agreed in principle by most of the Arab stakeholders, including the Palestinian Authority. How has this new dynamics changed EU attitudes toward Israel, according to you?
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation and for the question. And I was discussing this issue right now with the special representative for the Middle East peace process, Christophe Bigot, from the EAS. And I wish it would have changed more the attitudes in the EU. I can say for my country, for Germany, Germany lifted its weapons embargo. So, everything is back as before. So Germany changed its policies. But on the EU level, I have not yet seen that change. For me, it goes rather unnoticed, this big change, which I perceive as you do it. After the release of the hostages, we now have to move on to build the peace. But what is first, and this is a little bit of sidelined, is the disarmament and dismantling and removal of power of Hamas. And I have the feeling that everybody refrains from this next step, which is existential and central to Israel. So we have achieved something, but still the old rhetorics are in place of sanctions, of the focus on the PA and so on. So I would have wished more change of policies, and we have to push for this policy change still.
And you just mentioned the sanctions against Israel. We know that the EU has proposed sanctions against Israel, including partial suspension of the EU-Israel Association Agreement, but it's still in place. It's not off the. It's still not off the table, like Kaja Kallas, High Representative for Foreign Affairs, said. But what can we do to dismiss this, to remove this sanctions against Israel, while the situation has completely changed.
And still, the EU expects more steps from Israel. So I also talked very directly with Kaja Kallas, and still she wants to see progress on access of eco-humanitarian workers in Gaza. She wants to see progress in the West Bank. She wants to... she has many requests, so she's not yet satisfied. So she wants to have another move from the Israeli side towards the EU, which I'm a bit skeptical if this is needed. But I heard that, the Israeli foreign minister and Kaja Kallas are in close contact about, how these issues can be managed now. And she was also speaking of face-saving measures she needs to do, because there are still some member states which have not changed at all their policy, the Spanish, the French. So they just ignored what has happened on the ground. So there are still many member states who continue to want to have sanctions on the table. So Kaja Kallas is not yet free from this pressure.
Mm-hmm. Tomas Sandell, you have been organizing annual policy conferences for more than 20 years, as far as I know. How would you rate this conference that you organized last month compared to previous years? Was there anything new which you had not experienced before, or was it the same message as in previous years from all the speakers?
Thank you, Yossi, and thank you, Hildegard Bentele, for kindly co-hosting the conference. We very much appreciate your work here at the European Parliament and your speech at the conference and everything you're bringing to the table here. Coming back to 2004, that is a long time ago. And I think when we organized our first conference, it was something unique in the EU space. I think EU officials at the time had a difficult time understanding that people would come from all walks of life, from different corners of Europe. None of them, or very few, being Jewish, and saying that this is an important question for us. And I recall something that you said, Bentele, at the conference, where you said that protecting Israel is a European value. And I think this was an expression of that European value, that people would come here and say that this is something we want to make sure that Europe is doing right. It's interesting that one of the key questions in 2004 was the same question we discussed now, 21 years later, and that's the reform of the PA. And you may not remember or had any reason to study it at the time, yes. But there was actually an inquiry already at that time. Now we're talking 2004, 2005, about mismanagement of EU funds to the Palestinian Authority. And just to show how divisive the issue was already then, was that they couldn't agree on one inquiry. They needed two inquiries. So there was a center-left inquiry and center-right inquiry. And obviously they reached different conclusions. But in hindsight, we presented a paper where we said that this is unacceptable. We have to reform EU funding to the PA. And from the European Commission at the time, there was no external action service. They more or less dismissed it. So what happened next? The elections in Gaza. Hamas comes to power on an anti-corruption agenda, basically saying what we are saying, that the corruption in Gaza at the time is huge and we have to do something about it. And of course, the day after the election results, everyone in Brussels were in complete agreement. There are problems with the PA. We have to do something so we can stop the corruption. I would go on to say that it was also, I think the conference 2 weeks ago was unique. And again, if I may quote you, Ms. Bentele, in saying that there's no going back to pre-October 7. So I think that we have a situation now that we can't just keep spinning on and on and on about the things we've been saying for 20 years, but we have to look with fresh eyes on the situation, what is needed, what is required. I would say this, that my great hope is the fact that we now have clear Arab stakeholders, and I'm thinking especially about UAE and Bahrain and Saudi Arabia for that matter, who are more worried about the Islamization and the radicalization in Europe than our European politicians seems to be. For me, that's the game changer. That's the post-October 7 realities that I'm very hopeful for.
And if I can come back to 20 years before, I remember at the time there was an idea in the European Union to give Israel a special status, which is completely incredible at the time, because the relations were very strong at a certain period.
I think time. even discussing membership.
Yes, even discussing
membership. Yes.
Interesting. I'll pick this up.
That's right.
Interesting.
MEP Bentele, in one of your statements during the recent conference, you and Tomas Sandell mentioned it. You put into question whether the Palestinian Authority is still a relevant peace partner, given that it has failed to reform despite numerous pledges to do so, but it has also refused to unconditionally condemn the atrocities of October 7, and also continues with the so-called pay-for-slay system of rewarding families of Palestinian terrorists with payments and incentives. And we have seen that it has happened again recently. Even the European Commission has acknowledged this.
Yes.
So how should the European Union relate to the PA, the Palestinian Authority, in the rebuilding of Gaza? And if we leave out the Palestinian Authority, which are other actors, other groups which could take place and govern Gaza and be a partner for peace with Israel?
I mean, I'm absolutely astonished how much patience the EU has with the PA, and it was very interesting information that it takes more than 20 years the reform process. I think nobody in the world, would accept the reform process which lasts 20 years. So I think, and as I said, 7th of October was a cut, and this is why we have to deal differently with terrorism, and terrorists. And we have to be very strict, if terrorists infiltrate into institutions like the PA or UN institutions or agencies like UNRWA. So we cannot continue to do business as usual. So what can we do else? And I think in this regard, the Trump plan is interesting because they bring in the idea of international surveillance. So like the idea of the peace board, which brings in international actors because obviously, the Palestinian civilians have a hard time to manage themselves, if I put it that way. I mean, we are waiting for democratic elections for 18 years. So, I think we need a push. We need to, and I think the Trump plan brings in the idea, and we were just discussing, what are the plans to establish the peace board under Tony Blair, and to bring in maybe Palestinians from exile, who are, successful businessmen or so. I mean, we have to look for new Palestinian leaders because I think the political elite in the PA is not up to the job. And even if, the prime minister comes here and shakes hands, they have to prove that they want to really make a change. And as you said, only the expectations were deceived recently. They made a step kind of reform, which they had to admit was not a real reform. So again, we are just making halfway and very too little progress. So I think we should look for other solutions like bringing in international oversight, bringing in Palestinians which are not entangled, with the business, how it was done until now. I think that has is an interesting, outlook.
And has the EU now, with all this context, has a place in this board of a peace board?
Not yet. We fight for it, but I mean, the EU is putting itself strongly behind the PA. So if you are on the PA side, then you are not on the international board side. You have to choose sides at a certain moment. So all the efforts of the EU go into the PA, and I just heard it from the special representative Bigot. They also want to extend the PA to Gaza. So there's no new policy on it. So this new policy will be introduced by the US and other people like Tony Blair and other players. So the EU is not part of that.
And we saw also...
I'm so sorry to say, but it's like that.
And we saw also recently that there was the organization in Brussels of Palestinian donor group, and Israel was even not excluded, not invited. So there is a problem also.
Absolutely.
How can we discuss the participation of EU as a role in the peace plan without
Israel has no role in the donors' conference.
It's completely
it's contradictory. Yeah, I agree.
Tomas Sandell, in your speech at the conference, you mentioned the role of the European Union, and you quoted from Spider-Man in saying, with great power comes great responsibility. Do you think that the European Union used its power and influence in a constructive way in the Middle East, especially since October 7? And if not, do you think that the European Union policies could change in the coming years? Because there is also a new dynamics. We just spoke about it.
Yes, I like Spider-Man, so I think there are a lot of wisdom in quoting with great power comes great responsibility. It would be an understatement to say that EU influence in the Middle East conflict has not been constructive or creative. I mean, it's not only that they haven't optimized on all the funding that they're pouring in year after year after year into the region, but I see a lack of statecraft and creativity in the Brussels circles, and I think we would need something of the innovative thinking. Even during the first Trump administration, we had a policy conference during that time as well. I brought up the Trump peace plan from that time, and he was more or less dismissed because they said, well, we haven't seen anything black or white. So I'm not sure what it would take to shake up the EU bureaucracy, really to come with something concrete and some new, fresh thinking. Of course, we are in a way limited by the big powers. And when we mention the big member states, I'm not thinking of Germany now, but of France and Spain in particular, and then the smaller states like Ireland and Belgium and others who are very, very anti-Israel at their core. So I can't really, always trying to be optimistic, but I can't really see how this would come about in the EU. I have a perspective soon of 25 years, and if we were discussing the same things 20 years ago, I'm sorry to be pessimistic, but I'm always encouraged to hear people like Hildegard Bentele and many others in this parliament. I think the problem is, of course, with the elected officials, which in some way are not their own. I mean, they get their instructions from the member state. We mentioned even the High Representative, who can't think creatively or has the mandate to really push something. So it makes it a very unequal equation.
We often speak about people-to-people relations. Mm-hmm. And a recent survey made by an important think tank in Israel showed that more than 60% of the Israelis have a bad image of Israel, mm-hmm. of Europe, I mean, saying that Europe is even an adversary mm-hmm. of Israel. Are you surprised by such an important figure?
I'm not surprised. I'm sure you are not surprised. Hildegard Bentele is not surprised. And the ambassador, he mentioned this, of course, in his speech. He said the EU will have to make up their mind. You know, are you friends or are you adversaries? And you know, if you're a friend, and I'm quoting again from your speech, I think friendships is tested in difficult times. And I think the existential challenges that Israel has been going through now for more than 2 years, if they can't see that EU is a real friend, but we are talking about sanctions instead of solutions and peace deals, you know, then there is a fundamental problem. On a positive note, I would say that you know, in conjunction with the annual conference, we had our ECI Young Leaders Academy with 21 young leaders from 15 different EU member states. This was taken up by the Israeli Evening News on Thursday, and they were so surprised. They said, "Can you believe this? You know, these people are coming here to stand with Israel." So I think Israel needs to get more positive news from Europe, and we should all contribute in a way to show them that there are friends in Europe as well.
Especially because Europe needs also Israel, you know.
Absolutely.
And we see it on a daily basis also.
Absolutely.
Regarding cybersecurity, anti-terrorism. MEP Bentele, in several panels over the last few months, and also during the conference of European Coalition for Israel, you put into question whether the two-state solution, which is the EU mantra, as you say, is still a viable opinion and option also. Have you lost faith in the two-state solution? And if so, what are the other solutions and or other options, possible options?
Well, I mean, I can officially not say that I'm not behind the two-state solution. Officially, we all are. But, you know, I'm more in favor of pragmatism, you know, because the two-state solution is maybe like a reformed PA in a far future. So I rather concentrate, you know, what can really be achieved on the ground. And I always make it clear, you know, if Israel is not behind it, you know, nothing will work. You know, I mean, I'm insisting. It's all about Israel's security, you know, and if we don't accept Israel and its view on the situation, and I understood very clearly that this is currently not a vision, you know, Israel is embracing because of what has happened, because they were terribly deceived. And I heard many times, you know, we withdrew in 2005 from Gaza. So we have given the statehood and the peace a chance, but it was terribly misused. And so I understand, you know, that there's frustration, and I understand that there's a higher need for control, monitoring, you know, what's going on in the direct neighborhood. So, and I understand, as long as there is no clear idea that this new Palestinian state would be free of terror, and we are not there yet because Hamas is still in Gaza City. And as we said, you know, the PA has its problems. I understand that this is currently not a vision. This is why I would rather focus, you know, on issues to, let's say, have peace on the ground, you know, that we collect weapons, that we, you know, that Hamas withdraws from power. This is for me more relevant than now talking about a state which has no clear borders, no people, no. So that's for me too abstract. So I would rather, you know, having this peace on the ground, this reconstruction, the disarmament, the decrease of terror and terrorists, then we can talk about, you know, a state. But currently, I don't see any criteria fulfilled to now opt for this option. And I understand also from the French that this is purely symbolical, you know, idea, but which rewards Hamas and raises, you know, false expectations. So this is why, for me, it's hardly compatible with the situation on the ground, and this is why I don't want to lose time to discuss it, to be very honest. Yeah.
Tomas Sandell, the same question for you regarding the two-state solutions. Are you a supporter of the two-state solution? If not, what are the other options? The same.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was just thinking back that I was in the UN General Assembly Hall in November 2012, if I remember correctly, when Palestine was given a non-member state status, which is quite similar to this discussion, because there was a lot of symbolism and there was a lot of jubilations in Palestinian territories at the time that, finally we have a state. But of course, no one hardly remembers that decision. It had absolutely no consequences on the ground. So I agree with Hildegard Bentele that we need to be more pragmatic and practical than just, stick with these slogans and hashtags, two-state solution, free Gaza, free Palestine. I would also, I think it would be important also in this building to reiterate what has happened over the last 100 years. There was a two-state solution clearly already in 1921, when the British mandate was divided into Arab Palestine and a Jewish Palestine. And I think there are many, when I speak with initiated Arab commentators today, they say that a Palestinian state is not really sustainable. So what they are even looking at is that it would be a new federation with Jordan, for example, and it wouldn't be so much giving statehood to a particular people than just making sure that they get certain territories back from Israel. Again, we have to remember the partition plan and how that was rejected by the
78
Palestinians.
years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Something.
And as was mentioned, then the withdrawal from Gaza. So I don't think anyone who believe in empirical facts and look at these things scientifically would say that it's a no-brainer. There should be a two-state solution. I think two things that I want to mention. One is I much more believe in a pragmatic business model. And I think where EU was so counterproductive was when they started with the labeling directives, preventing Israelis from creating jobs for Palestinians in the disputed territories. We need to be much more pragmatic. I was there just a few weeks ago with the SodaStream factory. There was no factory any longer. It was easy for SodaStream to bring it into Israel proper, but thousands of Palestinians lost their livelihood. And I would ask the question for the EU, is this a policy which is really constructive? It's not.
MEP Bentele, I will go back to you and your country, Germany, which remains the largest EU member states. And I would like to know if you are satisfied with the Israeli policies of the new German government led by Friedrich Merz. And do you think that the German policy changed after the Greens lost the portfolio of the foreign affairs? We know that Johannes Wadefull is now from the CDU, is now the foreign minister. What is your view on this?
Well, I'm still a member of the German diplomatic service myself, out of service currently or on vacation. And I was following this, of course, closely. I mean, this was big news that after 60 years, the Christian Democrats got back the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But this tells you something. If a ministry is under the reign of liberals very long time, Social Democrats and Greens, you cannot get out of it in the first half year a Christian democratic, foreign policy. So this will take a lot of time, and they just did a big structural reform now in the ministry to focus more on German interests, and also to give more leverage to the, how we call it, Länderreferate, like the country desks. So I hope with this reform, the understanding of Israel is going to be better, but. I have still, the people who are there still follow, old political lines. And I can also felt this with when I was visiting the German ambassador to Israel. We discussed about an hour very fiercely because, there's always this, there always is the idea we have to criticize, Israel. Israel is never good enough. You always have to put pressure, criticize, and so on. And I just think I have a hard feeling to do this because, you know, Israel was attacked and is suffering from a huge trauma. So, I mean, imagine if Germany was attacked by its neighboring countries and 1,200 people being killed, 250 being taken as hostages. I mean, I don't understand why we cannot put ourselves into their shoes of Israel. It's a lack of empathy, and at the same, and I felt this really strongly, the influence of pictures, because the Hamas propaganda is rolling globally. So they are flooding with false pictures, with false narratives, the social networks, and even the chancellery is influenced by this. Even, you know, the foreign minister is influenced by this. And this is what the chancellor said. I cannot support anymore, you know, what Israel is doing. There's too many casualties, too many civilians being killed. I cannot support the pictures anymore. This is what he said. So, and I regret very much. And this happened recently again when Johann Wadefull went to Syria and he said, well, it's so destroyed, we cannot send back refugees there. So the power of the instantaneous impression and of pictures is tremendous, but I criticize this fundamentally. If you're under constant impression of pictures, you have a wrong assessment, you know, because there are catastrophes, as we know, all over the place. In Sudan, the catastrophe is 10 times bigger than in Gaza, but there are no pictures. There is no propaganda. So I think that's very bad, and we have to be very careful. So I want to, you know, make my assessment after the Chancellor has visited Israel this week. He'll be on visit this Friday to Israel. And I'm, you know, very curious about, you know, the outcome of the talks. I hope he has a good agenda, you know, like an encouraging agenda, and also to, you know, to make very clear that Germany, like in the past, is on the side of Israel. You know, I mean, we can also afford, with our history and our responsibility, to be very clearly sided with Israel.
That was all for this edition of the European Report. Thank you, MEP Hildegard Bentele and Tomas Sandell, for this very interesting discussion on the EU-Israel relations. My name is Yossi Lempkowicz, and this has been the European Report. See you again next month.
Emisiunea Ziua se apropie, se încheie aici. Vă mulțumim pentru atenție și vă dăm o nouă întâlnire săptămâna viitoare la aceeași oră. Sunt Codruța Burchelea, vă spun la revedere și Dumnezeu să vă binecuvânteze!